I spent hours analyzing what it actually means to endure what Drew has survived. Imagine the psychological horror of locked-in syndrome. For months, he was a prisoner, trapped inside his own flesh, completely aware of his surroundings, but entirely unable to interact with them. He had to lie there in the sterile silence of his room, listening to the clicking heels of the people who put him there. He had to listen to Willow plotting his demise, discussing his fate with a chilling detachment, as if he were already a corpse. He had to endure the scent of Nina's perfume as she leaned in, perhaps whispering her twisted justifications for keeping him paralyzed. The sheer amount of venom, betrayal, and unadulterated rage that must have pooled in his heart during those silent, agonizing months is unimaginable. Every single day was a masterclass in hatred, a slow-burning furnace forging a completely different man than the one we used to know. We watched him slowly regain his mobility, keeping it a tightly guarded secret from the very women who tormented him. He allowed them to believe they still held the power. When he finally managed to speak and provoke Nina by the lake, he was not just testing his recovering vocal cords. He was testing his dominance. He knew exactly which psychological buttons to push to make Nina snap, driving her to the point of pushing his wheelchair into the water. He wanted to see the sheer terror in her eyes when she realized he was no longer a silent victim. He wanted to feel the absolute rush of surviving her worst impulses. He is moving through Port Charles like a predator that has finally slipped its leash, silently tracking its prey from the shadows. We are walking down this dark corridor together, guys, and as we look at the pieces scattered on the floor, they start to form a terrifying picture. The more I think about it, the more I realize that Drew is not going to the authorities. He is not seeking legal justice for what Willow did to him, nor is he simply trying to expose Nina's crimes to the public. He is bypassing the law entirely because the law cannot deliver the kind of visceral, absolute retribution he craves. He is gathering his strength, mapping out the routines of his enemies, and preparing to strike. I keep coming back to the invisible hand that helped keep him in that bed. Drew must know, or will very soon figure out, that Brennan was the silent architect shielding Willow and Nina. Brennan held the blackmail material, Brennan manipulated the circumstances, and Brennan provided the cover that allowed the paralyzing doses to continue. Drew's vengeance will not just stop at the women who physically administered his suffering, it will inevitably extend to the man who enabled it. He is meticulously tracing the threads of influence and power, preparing to burn the entire network to the ground. But as we peel back these heavy layers of vengeance and retribution, a second, much quieter story begins to emerge from the darkness. Maybe there's another layer here, a shadow beneath the narrative that is far more heartbreaking than the revenge itself. The real tragedy of this unfolding nightmare is not about Willow, Nina, or even Brennan. It is about the innocent collateral damage caught in the crossfire. It is about Scout. Scout has just returned to town, a teenager trying to navigate a chaotic world that has constantly ripped her father away from her. She sits by the lake, painting, trying to capture some semblance of peace on her canvas. She has endured so much instability, so much loss, and so much fear. All she wants is a normal family. She wants a father who will smile at her, hold her, and be present in her daily life. She does not want a mob enforcer, and she certainly does not want a man consumed by a dark, violent vendetta. She has spent months watching her father suffer in that bed, praying for a miracle, hoping that when he finally woke up, they could just be happy. This is the unseen emotional conflict anchoring our story, the tragic irony that Drew cannot see. He undoubtedly believes that by destroying Willow, Nina, and Brennan, he is reclaiming his life and protecting his family. He rationalizes his dark thoughts by telling himself he is clearing the rot from his world so Scout can be safe. But his ambition and his deeply rooted hatred are completely blinding him to the reality of his daughter's fragile emotional state. His profound love for Scout is being eclipsed by his overwhelming, all-consuming need to make his enemies bleed. He is walking away from the light of his daughter's love and marching straight into the abyss. It doesn't seem accidental that Drew is keeping his recovery so tightly under wraps, even from the people who genuinely care about him. He is not just waiting for the right moment to reveal he can walk, he is orchestrating a massive, devastating finale. What if he intends to take out both Willow and Nina in one single, blood-soaked night? He does not want a drawn-out war. He wants a definitive end. He wants to strip Willow of her perfect life, her political ambitions, and her sense of security. He wants to push Nina to the absolute brink of insanity. I keep wondering whether Drew has already mapped out the exact room, the exact moment, and the exact weapon for this confrontation. He wants to isolate them. He wants to cut the power, disable the phones, and make them feel the exact same helpless, suffocating paralysis he felt in that hospital bed. He wants them to look into his eyes and know that they are utterly trapped, that their fate is entirely in his hands. In his mind, this is not murder, it is an execution. It is the righteous fury of a man who was buried alive and has finally clawed his way out of the dirt to drag his tormentors down with him. It's possible that Drew genuinely thinks he can commit this atrocity, wash the blood from his hands, and then simply walk back into Scout's life as the loving, rehabilitated father she has been praying for. He is compartmentalizing his inner monster, believing he can leash it once the deed is done and the slate is wiped clean. But violence has a terrifying way of spilling over its carefully drawn borders. You cannot unleash that level of darkness and expect it not to stain everything you hold dear. What if we're missing something crucial about Scout's role in all of this? She is not just a passive observer waiting in the wings. Teenagers are incredibly perceptive, and Scout has endured enough trauma in her young life to recognize the subtle signs of impending disaster. She can likely see the coldness creeping into her father's eyes. She can sense the rigid tension in his newly recovered muscles. She notices his secretive movements in the dark, the way he stares blankly into space, calculating his next move. She knows something is terribly wrong, and she knows that her father is slipping away from her just as she got him back. The atmosphere in this story is growing increasingly suffocating, guys. You can almost feel the heavy, oppressive storm brewing on the horizon, waiting to break. Imagine the night Drew finally decides to make his move. The house is deadly quiet. The shadows are long. He corners Willow and Nina in a secluded room, the cold steel of a blade gleaming in his hand. The psychological warfare reaches its peak as the sheer terror radiates from the two women. They finally realize that the paralyzed man they tormented, the man they thought was broken forever, is now their executioner, and there is absolutely no one coming to save them. But then the silence is shattered by the sound of frantic footsteps in the hallway. The tension spikes, not from a sudden jump scare, but from a sickening, heartbreaking realization of who is opening that door. It is Scout. She has followed him into the night. She has pieced together his erratic behavior and tracked him down. She steps into the room just as Drew lunges forward, his arm raised, driven by months of unadulterated rage and a blinding thirst for vengeance. In that split second, driven by pure instinct and the desperate, overwhelming desire to stop her father from becoming an irredeemable monster, Scout throws herself directly into the fray. She does not think about her own safety. She only thinks about saving her dad's soul. She places her own fragile body directly between the descending blade and its intended targets. The knife, meant to end the lives of Willow or Nina and finalize Drew's revenge, finds a completely different, infinitely more tragic mark. I can't shake the feeling that this is the only way Drew's dark crusade can ultimately end. Not with a triumphant, satisfying victory over his abusers, but with the ultimate soul-crushing defeat. Imagine the absolute, deafening silence that would follow that strike. The moment the red mist clears from Drew's eyes, and he looks down to realize he has struck his own flesh and blood, every ounce of hatred, every meticulously planned detail of his revenge would instantly crumble into ashes. If Scout falls by his own hand, bleeding on the floor because of his blind rage, Drew will realize in the most horrific way possible that his revenge has cost him absolutely everything. He will not be the victorious survivor returning from hell. He will become the architect of his own eternal damnation. He will have failed to destroy Willow and Nina, but he will have successfully destroyed the only person who ever truly believed in his redemption. As we sit here and look at the pieces currently moving on the board, something feels unfinished. We do not know if Scout will survive this hypothetical devastating strike, or if Drew will somehow pull back from the abyss before it is entirely too late. The cycle of vengeance never ends cleanly, and the price is always paid by the innocent. The story is still unfolding, quietly, in the dark corners of Port Charles, and we are just waiting, holding our breath, to see who makes the final, fatal move.
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.